Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is the co founder of Scented Realms, a tabletop RPG tool that uses the fourth sense to enhance your RPG experience. Please welcome Scott Curry to Epic Realms. How are you doing?
Excellent, Nick. Thanks for having us.
I'm excited to talk about your product and the stuff that you have, and I have some of it sitting here next to me that I got in, and I'm excited to chat
Excellent.
about it. I have a lot of cool questions. I'm sure you have a lot of cool answers, but I want to kind of go back and be like, what was your first actual introduction to tabletop role playing before any of this?
Yeah, I'm going to out myself on my age here. I'm 57 years old, so I have quite a many decades of fantasy kind of points in my life. But the earliest one that I can really identify is my 10th birthday and Christmas are a couple days apart, and my grandmother got me a joint birthday Christmas present, which was the original blue box Dungeons and Dragons. And anybody who's ever watched Stranger Things understands that early segment of
Yeah.
1980s BMX bikes, and playing D&D and stuff. It was literally as close to that as it could get. And getting that first edition and first experience of opening it up and seeing that you could live the fantasies of the things that I had only ever seen, like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings animations or something like that. But at that young age of 10, everything was possible, and started a group of players. And from that origin story, even some of the Scented Realms products, characters, and story arcs are from that 1978 first interaction with fantasy. So it was about as early as an age as I could remember.
That's awesome. I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious because a lot of people that played way back when there wasn't videos, there wasn't somebody that could
Yeah.
always walk you through. We didn't know what Guy Gax and Dave Arneson were doing at the time and how they were running the games. All you have is the words in a book. How far off do you
Yes.
think you running out of what was in the book were you from the actual system and what it was supposed to be?
You got to learn reverse math. You had negative armor class, FACO, all these things that, over the years they've removed from the game for all sorts of different reasons. But we tried, man. We really tried to get under the hood. Some parts ended up becoming, so laborious and slowing the game down that we would round off the edges and make them more of a home brew. We came up with some ways to deal with certain problems of the math and all that stuff. But it seemed like I was with a lot of like, um, what you would call min maxers, people, friends that at
Yeah.
an early age were always looking at the rules and trying to get the combinations of things that would ultimately create the biggest killing events. So as a DM, I would reverse it on. I would always be trying to twist and make it hard on them for being able to just take advantage of all the different rules. But yeah, it was a way different game back then.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was a lot more inside your head fantasy when you were that young.
As a GM in our close knit group, we always have a rule. It's like, well, if you use a thing, the GM can use it too. Just remember that.
Yeah,
So if you're gonna
there
break
you
it in a
go.
certain way, I can too. So be
Yes.
careful what you choose to do, young players.
Yep. Yes. We also ended up putting in some rules that help manage the game by creating sentient, swords or items that could
Yeah.
actually, as an NPC, talk to the character to say, use a 10-foot pole, idiot, not your finger. You don't want to touch the
Right.
black jelly with your finger. So we would always try to turn certain items alive through some of our wish mechanics that we did homebrew.
Yeah.
And that allowed a little bit of DM narrative. But when I was about 12 or 13, I ran into a friend of mine, Alex, who was a way better DM than I was. And I got to switch from the very difficult and challenging role to be a good DM to being a min max player.
Yeah.
So I ended up being my own worst enemy but he was so talented at it. And as we got older and, those mid 80s, not a lot to do nights turned into just epic gaming fantasies that, again, a lot of what we built this story around for our story side, Ascended Realms, harkens all the way back to those, 1982, 1983 years. So it's just such a great memory.
Nice. Since then, what other systems have you gotten to play and play around with, and what are some of your favorite RPG systems you've worked on or you've played with?
Yeah, the age between kind of late teens till I was about 27, I still played D&D. I moved from Michigan. I grew up in Michigan until I was 20. And then I came out to Southern California and established a group of friends, found some people that hadn't played D&D before, and exposed them to that. They were pretty quickly hooked on it. And I played until I was about 27 years old. At that time, I started having babies. My wife was very tolerant, but one baby turned into two babies, and by the time I was 30, I really didn't have any time for gaming,
Right.
unfortunately. But at that time, things like Ultima Online, actually, it
Yes.
was AOL D&D, Gold Box Game. I don't know if anybody remembers that out there in the
Yeah.
community, but Gold Box Games, those were a way to be able to play D&D without having to go through all of the headache of bringing a whole bunch of people together. So it was really the Gold Box series that forced me to buy my first 286 computer. I bought the software on the 5 1/4 inch floppies, and just stared at that box until I had enough money to buy the computer that could run it. And so those were some of the ways that I got to enjoy it. And then the online experience started to happen with AOL, and that was a real change when you could go online and interact with other people,
Right.
and play games like that. So that was probably the next phase, and then that went into Ultima Online, which again was an effort, not really perfected, kind of a 3D or
Yeah.
whatever that isometric view. But then ultimately came EverQuest, which we talked a little
EverQuest.
bit about offline,
We
and
did. We
that
did.
that changed that changed everything, man. When EverQuest came out, it allowed that nighttime after the kids and all the responsibility was down, 10 o'clock till sometimes too late.
Did you
I
play?
would
Did
start
you
to be
ever
able to play
play
that.
on one of the role play servers where you like had to talk in character the whole time, or were you an out of character type server, or both?
No, I was on I actually in San Diego 989 Studios. Sony had their development studio here, and Brad McQuaid and all the guys that brought that thing to life were within my area. So I boldly went in there one day, and I sell packaging at the time for 30 years. That was my career until I retired about 5 years ago. But the packaging aspect to it allowed me to just cold call them and say, hey, you got to have a box for this thing. Let me, and it really had nothing to do with that. I just wanted to meet the developers, and I was able to get on a beta test, have a CD or DVD or whatever it was, and take that home and be able to do it. So I was on an early server, never did the role playing side of it, but we took it serious and built clans. There's some game stores here that brought together networked computers so we could go and do
Oh
some of
wow.
these deep raids and stuff like that early on too, man. It
Yeah.
was really pretty progressive.
So over the course of like the last, I mean, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, the gaming world has kind of seen a new explosion. But on top of that,
Yes.
all of these new fun little tools they didn't have in the second edition or even the third edition era, where they have like plates for minis on the bottom of them, or dice
Yeah.
towers, or little templates for things like fireballs. All of these neat, unique things. People playing music. You'll change a scene and they'll play
Yes.
music in the background. Led Zeppelin or whatever. What are some of the
Yes.
coolest tools for role playing that you've seen come out that aren't just part of the core experience that before all of your stuff?
I used to say with my friends when we were first playing, Nick, that if you could get four people or three to four people around a card table and really allow that center part of the table to be the storytelling vehicle, you can create worlds that are just beyond imagination. And if the buy-in is there, you don't need a lot of other things. But
But
when you start seeing some of the things that have been developed, I reverse that wholeheartedly. There were like video tables now that you've seen where they're taking basically, big flat screen TVs and putting them face down on the
right,
tabletop. And now you have moving rivers and ocean effects,
yeah,
and that you can have craft tables that would just allow you to miniature through these unbelievable terrains. So if you kind of take it all the way up there, but before that, it was like Dwarven Forge was some of the early, manipulatable, configurable individual pieces that you could first lay down a dungeon, and then you'd have reveal panels
yeah,
where certain rooms were like that. Snot Goblin Gaming is a close friend of ours, and we work with him on a couple different projects. And he's created some of that configurable, almost Lego type terrain that you can build these things quickly. But the man caves and women caves that have been created, like you mentioned, that bring in sight, sound, and all other elements. They cosplay up and dress, and we have some people on our Discord that share their D&D rooms. And dude, we have people that have built rooms that the windows have video screens, fake windows that have video screens in them. So when they're saying you're in an ocean adventure, it looks like a seaport. And the waves are going
Wow.
around outside the room. I mean, so there's just an endless amount of things that have blown us away. But obviously you set me into an easy one there. The one thing that was kind of missing was a really good way to bring in a fourth sense of fantasy. And so we saw a sliver of opportunity amongst all these developments that happened. A lot of it accelerated after COVID and Stranger Things. I think those were two kind of cross points that caused a renaissance of people saying, hey, let's get together. And I believe that with all the AI and all the ridiculous, endless amount of digital 2D content that we're being force fed, it's getting together around that table again, big or small, props or no props, and looking at your friends and drinking a beer live and being able to do it. So I would almost say it's the commodity that's the most exciting, but that's also a good way that you can in person smell some of the sense of fantasy that we've created.
Yeah, can't imagine it would be terribly easy to get people that are, all at home at different homes on a roll 20 to be like, well,
Yeah,
what does it smell like? Well, let me
yeah.
explain it and hope that you can kind of get the gist with your own imagination, right?
Yeah. One of the guys, Morgan at Forever DM, he's a Instagram guy that does a local live game. Amazing. He's one of the people that are doing the Mysticon event that's coming up in October. Also, he has the ability to paint pictures and do things in a way that I think really it at every level it showcases it. But he did a video for us on all the ultimate other things like video tables and lights and sound. But he did a thing around the fourth sense, and he was like, "Can you smell it? Can you imagine it? No." And then he just brought in all these different scent vials that we had done, and how you could, experience them in a different way for storytelling, for the DMs and GMs that are trying to build that, next level. People do things like, invisible maps and UV light reveals and stuff, and
Right.
there's just so much cool content out there. But when you say to a party, you're walking into the cave appears empty, then you put in the scent of an orc, and people know, roll dice, man, the cave's not empty. The DM's lying to us
Yeah.
in a way that's being revealed by an element that isn't seen or heard, it's actually smelled. So it's been just so fun to watch what people can do with this extra layer of storytelling.
So obviously we're talking about it. Explain how Scented Realms kind of came to be. Like it was an idea in the mind, and then because there's got a lot of moving parts to get something like that underway, right?
It started off as something completely commercial. My business partner and close friend Hans Hansen, who's the original co-founder, just kind of a real quick housekeeping thing.
Yeah.
Our Centered Realms is co-founded by Hans and myself, and then Paul Bowman, who is a just kick-ass F-18 Navy pilot who joined our story. He's an active DM. He loves the game and is currently on top of every single rule and variation that we really weren't. So we brought him in. So the three of us make up the Scented Realms team.
Okay.
We have some individuals, Krista Cooper and Ryan Nicholson, that help us on kind of coordinating things and stuff. But it was really us. And to begin with, it was just Hans and I, and he had access to this dry wave scent technology, which is the safest, lowest amount of chemical way that you can bring a scent into a space, and it doesn't linger or hang in the air the way that aerosols, nebulizers, incense, and the most common candles were used. So almost everybody burns a candle or has some sort of ambiance in there
Yeah.
that happens to add a scent, but nobody had really looked at, multiple layers of it. So when Hans and I were working on our commercial applications for that technology, he wasn't as much as a fantasy person as I was, and I started like looking at what we could create from these raw elements, and we had 300 scent note raw elements to build from. And I was like, man, this is incredible, because a normal round of D&D takes 5 to 7 minutes, let's say, depending on size. It could be a little longer, a little
Yeah.
shorter, but that's about how quickly the dry wave scent technology can dissipate if you don't overload the room. So if you put a small amount into a room, this technology of the scent dissipates. And I was like, my gosh, man, that you could go from a tavern to a woods to a crypt, to the monsters that lie within, and narrate it through the story without overwhelming people's senses or leaving a lot of residue or chemicals in the air. So when that happened, I said to Hans, "Hey, let's just try. Let's see what the local gaming stores think." We started to build some blends, but then it was like Pandora's box. The all the layers and the ways that we were like, okay, we can't just launch with 8 scent.
Right.
There's just fantasy is so big, and then it was like, okay, what is the minimum amount of a library that you could create to make a real tool
Yeah.
for game storytellers? And it ended up being about 50. So that's where that 300, the investment into the raw components to what are these creatures, how do they exist in the fantasy world, and then how can we really bring them to life. And we love everybody who puts scents of fantasy together. There's competitors that do candles, have done a great job, but we just felt like, the red dragon doesn't smell like cinnamon.
Yeah.
That's not what it smells
Yeah.
like. We want to make something that's like based off of an actual lizard smell, like if you've ever owned a bearded dragon or something,
Yeah.
a dry lizard smell. And then what is the biome that they'd be in? And what is the breath weapon they use? And then combining those together. And in doing that, man, we found we could create fidelity, real true scent of what this creature smells like. And that was the aha moment. And at that point, we were like, all right, what can we do? So we started to look at Kickstarter as one of those great, communities that are welcoming to a real small startup like ours. And a year later, we actually have been able to deliver. We have 401, the 401st backers. So we have pins all around the planet that will be able to say, "Hey,
Yeah.
stories are being told," and that was the beginning of it.
I'm curious how R&D goes about something like this, right? Because like you also have a little a game system that kind of backs it, so you can like play a game that's not just a basic D&D. Like obviously that was the
Yeah,
intent, but you have your own thing
right.
too. What
Yeah.
what was the R&D like separately? So like first the scent, like you're sitting there, it's like, are you like literally taking these and being like, okay, what's this one and this one mix smell like? What's this? How does the R&D look like on that? And what does the the quality assurance of trying to balance those out kind of look like?
Oh man, that's a great question, Nick. And it really had a life arc that changed as we went. When we became more and more determined to create a Coca-Cola, Kentucky Fried Chicken sort of thing, that you couldn't say it's this and this and describe it. It was actually
Right.
a larger, complex blend of things that allowed you to create it. So when we were going through those thought processes, it started out again by having almost like notes on a keyboard or a piano, and you start playing it, and you're like, what sounds good and what
Yeah.
smells good, and then using some AI technology to make sure that we kept our spectrum as far apart, so that as we started using notes together, we weren't creating things that were too close to other things. So 10 dragons, man, how can you identify 10
Right.
individually different dragons? And so as we started investing into the library, which is a significant investment, we got more and more determined to be like, we're going to know exactly what a horse smells like, exactly what a wet dog smells like, exactly. So when we're creating a werewolf, you can use a wet dog, you can use some of the elements of, cloth, torn cloth, or blood on his fangs, and create something that is identifiable. So it was part science, part passion of the magic love of fantasy. And then when Paul came in, I got to give it to him. He has a nose for it. Some people are just blessed. And some of those final tune moments that we brought together, the final 52, was when Paul came in and we showed him everything we had. And then he did an assessment, and we had taken it out to a lot of different game stores and gotten feedback that we were like, got it. And knock on wood, we have over 100 units of our pledges delivered already, and we have had just incredible reviews, just from Discord to people doing personal videos
Yeah.
describing it. So it feels like it worked. It was all hard, but it was about a year of development prior to launching the project.
Then the gaming side of it, on the gaming, so was that like
Yeah.
parallel to it, or did that come in after, where you're like, I'm gonna add a game so that like people can just do this standalone without going out and buying D&D books, or they just want to try this scent thing and have a little game to go along with
Yeah.
that? How did that part develop?
Yeah, we did some product testing, and there are, first of all, the open gaming license that Wizard of the Coast affords all of us was an amazing way to plug into the rules that
Right.
are already out there. So we were definitely not going to try to create our own game system. We were going
Right.
to try to create something that could plug in easily into other game worlds, and especially in Dungeons and Dragons. But when we did our kind of research, it felt like too big of a haul to say we're creating all these scents for just our game. It was a mistake. We
Yeah.
found that people were saying, I don't want to have to play your game.
Right.
Not that they don't, not that in the future maybe they wouldn't, but they're like, you know what? I already have a game. I've been playing this homebrew game for 20 years,
Right.
or something. So we said, you know what? Let's make it agnostic. Let's just take the best high fantasy creatures across the spectrum of, in the air is what we call things like the scent of blood, the scent of fear, the scent of victory. Cue notes that when your DM plays the scent of fear before an encounter, it knows, hey man, you better pay attention or you might die. So those sort of tools, and then the creatures that are fought, the environments they fight in. So that was the kind of plus or minus of having rules attached to all of it, or
Right.
just launching something that could be used for everybody. And it was a great move, because we've had people that are not playing D&D that are just storytelling, Gloomhaven and other franchises that are completely outside of where we even knew there would be
Right.
interest. But as you mentioned, we would like to have a fourth sense of fantasy game mechanics that are kind of like, again, kind of throwing back to psionics, or mental, hit points versus physical hit points. We wanted to have some ways that people could be awoken into their fourth sense of magic, and we did it with a cool in-game mechanism where there's a meteorite, basically asteroid that travels, and occasionally it deposits meteorites. When those meteorites hit, anything within their scent blast range becomes awakened, and some other game elements occur. But it means that you're now able to go into these feats, spells, classes that have this extra layer. Demon Slayer is a great anime. I'm sure many of your fans maybe are familiar with it.
Right.
It has a movie out right now. But they took a scent battle system into that anime, where they'll black out all the rest of the surroundings, and you'll see just the scent trail leading to the perfect strike. And that was so inspiring for us to say, all right, maybe there is something to this. So
Yeah.
coming up next, we're going to try to do an expansion launch called the Quest for the Wicked Sniffer. And for the first time ever, your player character can be improved on its skills and strengths by your human's perception of scent. So if you're able to identify through some really fun kind of timeout mechanics for when you level up, the DM says, okay, you can do a trial, and it's a trial-born test. And if you can determine between these A, B choices of what are these actual scents, you can acquire in-game rewards, like a
Okay.
familiar that only can be acquired by your human's perception of the fantasy sense, but then giving something that your player character now can use in game because
Okay.
your human had it. So that was the fun parts that we're
Yeah.
trying to develop.
Nice. I'm curious because I'm in the box over here. There's one that says cave troll, right? And my
Yes.
brain
Wow.
says to me, do I really want to smell this? So how are
Yeah,
you
that's
balancing Like, here is something that is traditionally known as, this is not a good smell, this is not something you want to smell,
Yes.
to something you want to fill the room in and not chase your players away from the table gagging. Like, how do you balance
Yes.
that?
That again, great question, and it was a lot of trial and error. There is a kind of, we call it a 70-30 split between the first 52 library. We have 24 more scents they're going to release in the second library, some additional creatures and spells and mechanics. But the first ones, we said, okay, 70% of the library range from good smelling, like Faye. It's like a very pleasant, very nice halfling home is the number one most positive. It's just a delicious place you'd love to be, to interesting, where you'd be like silver dragons and things that are kind of in that. And then the last 30 go from interesting to, oh my God, Cave Troll is the worst, I think, of the collection.
Okay.
But what blew our mind, Nick, is when we would go out to these live tests, people would smell that. They go, oh, that's not good. And then they would want to smell it again. And they would be like, oh yeah, I kind of like it. So we tried to just cut that line. We avoided sulfur, because sulfur, although it's regularly talked about in fantasy, it is
Yeah.
just such a negative smell that if we use it, which only a couple of them you have any, it's 3% or under. So it's barely noticeable in there. But there are other elements that are more earthy, like going to a farm. If you walk around a real farm, if you live on a farm, some of those scents can become, that's my house. I love
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
smell of cow manure in the morning, or whatever it would be. But the difference between a horse stall and a pig pen is a significant different
Right.
experience at the farm.
Yeah, it is.
So we were trying to narrowly weave through that. A lot of the creatures that we have, succubus is one of my favorite ones, is because it's a creature that's obviously a bad intent, wants to
Right.
do bad things to you, but it seduces you. So would that be a good
Right.
smelling or a bad
Exactly.
smelling creature? You're like, how can a devil creature have a good smell? But we blended it in a way that one is probably, I think, the most perfectly balanced between something is not right, but it still smells
But
good.
you really
And I
got it.
don't know
Yeah.
why. If you ever held a baby and you smell its freshly bathed head and then you realize it needs a diaper change, kind of in that middle ground, that's a little bit of what a succubus looks like.
Well, based
Anyway,
off of that thought, there is,
yeah,
because there's a lot of people that are sensitive to scent. They're sensitive to smells.
yes,
Medical facilities, you
you
can't
bet.
have perfume, you can't have even
Right,
soap has to be unscented soap. How does
you
this
bet.
affect people in that way, and how do you guys make it so that it can still be used by people with scent adverse
High
issues?
sensitive.
Yeah, high
Un-
sensitivity.
un- yeah, unfortunately, there's a certain category of people, players, and just like in everything in life, they might be epileptically sensitive to strobing lights, and you can't do
Right.
any lighting effects that would affect that. And you are 100% right. For some people, man, our product is just not going to work for them. Those are the same people who do not currently burn a candle
Right.
or do a nebulizer or anything like that. So unfortunately, there are some people who are just super sensitive. But one thing we found is if the DM has a library, a collection, and we have a display system so that the scent cartridges are up on the wall. You're not putting them away. You can actually use it as part of your, like, displaying your fantasy. And back in the day,
Yeah.
VHS and CD collections would be on there. But we found if the game master gives advocacy to the player that has the scent sensitivity and say, hey, out of these, take a smell on some of them. Are you able to tolerate them? Do you like these? Okay, can these? And as long as they know it's part of what's coming, that seems okay. So we've overcome it in some, but most people, because again, dry wave dissipates very quickly.
Yeah.
You can fan it away, and even a negative smell will dissipate, because again, we have different lengths of time that you release. So if you're doing a creature release, you would do like a 15-second release from the scent engine. It'll fill the room for about 4.5 minutes in a 10 by 12 room, let's say.
Okay.
So it's a very small window of time, and usually game mechanics are happening during that time, so they're not fixated. And it isn't a good storytelling tool to stop the game and go, did you smell that?
Right.
It's really more of like, you continue to use it as a tool of telling story. And most of the time, 80%, we have had no problem. And then in that 20%, we've had some people come back with some solutions that seem good. We do have an interesting thing, if it's okay that I go on a tangent a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, go for it. Go for it. Go
And
for a
just
tangent.
a short tangent. Neurodivergent children
Yes.
have lots of sensitivities,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
again, we're doing some really cool alternate use case for our scent engine for scent adventure nighttime storybooks, and it's
Okay.
something that you can put 8 scents into the scent engine. There's a children book that has the different scent, kind of like an ad libs, where you put in your own little
Yeah.
parts to the story. And on the app, as the story is being read and you say fresh cut grass, the kids get to push and they smell fresh cut grass. Or you can have, again, a unicorn or something very high fantasy that gives it. But by letting them choose the scent and having advocacy, the control of when it's released, it breaks down a lot of the resistance to it that they were finding. And we actually are working with someone to kind of run some tests and do some studies around this, so that we can say, hey, this might be a bedtime tool for people who are, already fighting the nighttime procedure, but allowing them to tell a story in a scented method. Some children don't get to smell a lot of cut grass, or what a horse smells like,
Yeah.
or different things. So we want to introduce some ways to give them these in a storytelling. But it was interesting on how the neurodivergent children sensitivities are sometimes grown into adults who have those sensitivities, even though they don't show any, on the spectrum stuff. They just retained that really sensitive sense. So
Yeah.
we're doing some studies behind it and hope to be able to find a way to make it a better memory binding mechanism, because scent is closest to your memories. We all have scent memories from our childhood that just stick with us our whole life.
Yeah. How are you doing with the introducing that? Because I know, you play a one game and something really bad happens and you have that scent, and then later, 2 years later, you smell that scent again. You're gonna be like, wait a second, this is where that one character died. 30. I forgot about that adventure, but the scent hits you. Is that something you're planning
Yeah,
for and hoping to have happen in the long run?
that, and especially like, and this is just like kind of long game stuff,
Right.
but if we have children that are okay, early on with sense of fantasy, that are the friendly woodland fairies and elves and unicorns and things like that, and they from an early age know what a unicorn smells like. And if everyone, as we continue to grow our you know community, that they all agree that is what a unicorn would smell like. Why not? It smells like a horse, smells like 5% cotton candy, because it should. And then, a X amount of magic. And like we put all these blends into it. But when they smell that unique combination and they can say that's a unicorn, we feel in the future, when robotics and all these different VR and different things, if we can define those to the young generation right now, that would be an incredible storytelling tool that could take place over decades. But for negative experiences in game, it's almost like a training tool. And we are working with some gaming tables companies that are hopefully being able to have a switch system where one player who has a really high sense perception on their character can get the scent prior to the other seat positions even getting it, so
Oh,
that they could have a mechanism of playing it and knowing danger. I'm smelling the sense of danger, and I'm going to alert the rest of the party prior to them even knowing the danger is there. So really narrative tool storytelling, but none of the scents are so bad that even if you uncap Cave Troll right now and smell it, like you'll know it's not a good smell, but it's not so bad that it's not as bad as a baby diaper.
can you increase the strength of it? Because I know you said that's like an overtime
Yes.
thing. You can make it longer, but can you make it like this
Yep.
smells? I don't know, for lack of a better term, brighter, stronger, heavier.
Yes.
Even though it'll dissipate in the same amount of time.
Yes, definitely. So the release element dictates that directly. So
Okay.
if you pipe in a 5 second, 15, or 5 second, 10 second, 20 second, 50, the longer you're releasing it, that plays a major role on a single scent action. So again, if you're saying, giants are coming into the fight, you release a single a scent release of the giant, and then do not double down on it. It will dissipate in that time period where it'll drop out of your factory, and you won't notice the next one won't be overlapped. But you can layer them. So if you have a longer encounter, or you're going through a crypt that is a longer adventure, you can have it pulse so that the DM releases it 30 seconds, then they wait 3 minutes, another 30 seconds, and it'll start to create, an air freshener effect where there's a larger amount of the scented particles in the air, which this is the smallest molecular bond to an air particle that you can put to travel a scent. So it's very, very IFRA safe. It doesn't trigger allergies and stuff like that. But as you keep piping it in, you can keep layering it up. So you can create a pretty high level of intensity by using it in that fashion.
You mentioned is there a cell phone app that runs one of your mechanisms?
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah,
as far as
yeah,
like
it
the
works.
layout, and you're like, you just have the stuff in, like you have like a bunch of cartridges in the machine, and then you just trigger whatever you want.
Yeah, so like everyone that is a game master or a dungeon master knows, it's a lot of prep. There's a
Right.
lot of prep work that goes in. So as you write out your adventure for that night, X amount of hours, you predetermine the 8 scent vials that can go into the scent engine. It holds 8 at a time. And then they go into an app. And it's a really simple, direct interface. It's easy to hot swap if you're using your phone for other D&D elements, but they can quickly have that available so that there's no friction. And this was an amazing gift from all of the backers. The 401st, we love them. All of our fantasy story NPCs are anagrams of their names. So we built that in. We have the Scent Syndicate, which is 24 of the most just lovable backers of our that play the role. So we're doing everything we can to help build the community behind
Right.
it. And so I'm sorry, I drew a blank on the question there.
That's all right. That's
uh,
all right. Uh,
uh,
so here's a question based on the phone app.
yeah,
When you have
yeah, the
that up
phone
there,
app. Sorry, that
yeah,
was it. That was the phone app. Sorry, I'm so sorry. But when the phone app became part of it, it was to make it as easy as possible for the DM to use it and control it. Originally, the product was a turn knob based system. So the scent engine had the 8 in it. The DM would turn the knob physically and then release the scent with just a button. But when we got over, we funded in 8 minutes. We went over $100,000, and we said at that point, over $100,000, we're going to turn the whole system into an automated system with mechanical printed circuit boards, and the tech stack went through the roof.
right.
So all of the things that made it difficult for us to deliver the final version was because of that change, that we wanted it to be magical. So the DM or GM could have the scent engine away from them, kind of in a non-obvious position, and without anyone knowing, the engine and the blowers are all super quiet. The scent could be entered into the room. So that's where the app came in, is we wanted it to be the ultimate storytelling tool. Sorry, I drifted on the question there originally.
No, it's all right. Well, the reason I ask is because it's really neat to use the cell phone, but in today's day and age, because since the '80s we've been talking about something called smell-o-vision, right? Where there's
Yes.
a TV you can smell, and I'm like, I can only imagine that you could enter in like 8 cartridges of whatever and be like, okay, this is timed on the app. Put in Die Hard, and these are scents for the Die Hard movie that will just play when the movie plays. And so it's like, okay, this is the exploding thing, and now you smell the explosion aftermath or whatever. And
Yes.
people that already have your product could just apply it to watching movies and films or TV or whatever, provided it's programmed that way. So I wasn't sure if you guys have thought about that, if that's something you might think about down the road.
Oh, that's just great. Yeah, actually, it's already in it. So the app has this thing with time sequencing, which we could do exactly what you just said. And that is, so many people have watched Lord of the Rings 50 times, but when they say oh my God, they've got a cave troll at that 7 minute and
Right.
58-second part of the movie, the scent engine releases it. So exactly what you're saying, you can build a scent script where there's 8 different scent points in the movie. Some of them you might go back to and go through, but it allows you to put in the timestamp during the movie when it is. And with AI, again, we love and hate AI as much as everybody else. But if you just go into chat and put in, give me the timestamps. These are my collection of sent file libraries. Give me this movie where the best timestamps for this, it will give you the exact second, minute and second in that movie when you should use those collections. So that's one way you can just automate the whole thing. But what we're really excited about is that fans will start making their own mix script.
Right.
And that would be, highlighting different points in the movie. Maybe it's more on the elf side of it, in the high notes of it, or maybe it's somebody that's really abusive and only wants to do, the orcs and goblins
Right.
and cave trolls. So you could have these different scripts where it would be like, endure this script or enjoy this
Right.
script, depending on what scent notes that you create. But yes, the answer is yes, we do have that built in. That was one of the things we could add. It's a rudimentary version, because again, the cost of building an app that goes into an app store and maintaining that
Right.
is a very high demand. And what we wanted to create something that, in the worst possible scenario, if this was all we were able to do, that you would still have something that you could use for years without us. And that's why we did a direct Wi-Fi app UI interface, so that anybody can use it even if we no longer exist. But the good news is we're going to exist. There's
Yeah.
really been some great developments along the way. So in the future, we hope to be able to create higher and higher level versions of automation, integrating your library that you own in the movies that you want to see, and maybe being able to automatically create some sense scripts. There's some legal stuff involved with
Right.
that too,
Right.
but
Obviously.
under the same note, you can, when you're not using your scent engine for playing games, we wanted to create many different layers of value propositions. And you can use it for movies like that. Again, that would be a limited use, but you can set it up into an air freshener mode, so that in the morning you wake up to the, fresh of a halfling home, and in the afternoon you get a gold dragon, and at night you get something, maybe one of the environments that you enjoyed, like, the caverns or something along
Yeah.
that line. So you can script throughout the day for it to just act like an air freshener, a really unique
Yeah.
air freshener collection that your mom's Yankee candles can't compete with.
Nice. Your Kickstarter went up through July. Uh,
Yeah.
can you give an update
Or,
on for the backers, the people that did that, what your fulfillment
yeah.
process is, where you're at right now, and what you have yet to do?
Yes, we faced every uphill headwind that was available, and we conquered them. It was just one at a time when we made the decision to go from that really analog turn system to, in the same, because we had already, some of the early investments kind of, and the size constraints that we had, because we wanted to make it small as we possibly could. We had some parts that were developed, and we started trying to see how much could we put inside of this, and that was just so complicated. And every gear ratio and every possible hall sensor, resisted us. But we kept putting the effort, time, and money that it took to get into it. And about 2 months ago, we got to the point where we were able to start sending out our field testing units. These were like the first 20 units that you would do field failure rates and see, did it ship okay? Did it make the travel all right? And knock on wood, those started to go well. We had to do a couple of small adjustments to the motor feeds and how the power was going through, because the overheating engine caused a couple of gears to melt, little things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after all of those were overcome, we, about a month and a half ago, said, okay, now we can start looking at doing production lot runs. And we've done two of those, getting us up to about a quarter of the total backers have been fulfilled. And next week, we have our largest single week shipping that we're going to be accomplishing, 100 scent engines that will be going out. And as long as everything goes as smooth as we hope at that higher level of production automation, that we'll be able to do all the rest of it, the delivery, before the end of November, which will get us just about a year from when we launched the Kickstarter to a delivery. And some Kickstarters do better when the product is pre-canned, but for really everything we had to do, Nick, we feel like we did a good job, and we've stayed communicative with all of our backers. And again, we're just blessed by the 401st's willingness to support us and stuff. So we're really close to final deliveries, but there is over 100 units out right now, every weekend, telling stories with the 4 cents.
That's awesome. What do you got coming up? You got another
Yeah.
Kickstarter planned in the works, maybe? A little expansion,
Yes,
something?
yes. A little expansion. That's, again, tapping into what you were talking about early on, making the decision of how do you bring rules to this versus, just letting people do whatever they want with it. We kept want and will continue to build something that anybody can use for anything that they would like, from just a home air freshener system that's just really unique, to different stories outside of the D&D game mechanics. We have not yet broken into sci-fi, but that's a dream next step for us. We would love to, tell you exactly what a lightsaber smells like when it deploys, or what a
Yeah.
Wookiee smells like someday. Here's hoping. But to stay within what we can do, we are going to add some game mechanics and rules for the fourth sense, so that your games, your homebrew, or if you want to play it right inside the Scented Realms, legacy story arc, you can do that also. But in the first of next year, we're going to be targeting kind of probably, if perfect world, February, but probably
Okay.
March, that we'll launch our second one. It's called The Quest for the Wicked Sniffer. And it does have the trial born tests, where you'll be able to have some game mechanics where you can test your ability to tell the difference between, different fantasy scent, and have that advantage your player character sheet. So that, along with that, we also have the scent wand, which is a handheld device. It's really just like a personal air blower that you see people use as like a cooling fan when you're at church,
Yeah.
or at a sporting event. But we have supercharged it so that it can hold the scent vial cartridges. So when you're at the Magic the Gathering, convention, where not everyone smells great, you can have a way to, cool
Oh, yeah,
yourself
yeah, yeah.
off
There
and
you
wave away the stinky player next to you. uh, Without being rude,
Without being
or
rude.
if your
Yeah.
dog is next to you, yeah, if your dog is next to you, you can get rid of the dog stink, the poof or whatever. But
Right.
that will give us a entry point to our Scented Realms collection, with 5 cent vials for under $100, to allow people to start their collection. It comes with a stand, and it allows you to have a more analog, kind of like more the original version, where you could use it as a storytelling
Yeah.
device, but it would be a little bit different than having the clandestine scent engine. But the price point is, again, at the below $100 mark, and then that's kind of our second act. And then the third thing that we're hoping at mid-year, we'll be able to launch the children's Scent adventure books, which will add a nighttime storytelling component to what the Scent engine can do. It runs on a lithium power pack battery, so you can take it anywhere, up to your kid's room, put them to sleep, and then go down and play D&D with your buddies.
There you go. Uh,
Yeah,
you mentioned to me a little bit, and I know you have some upcoming appearances, convention type
yeah,
stuff, but you also mentioned that you have like an in-store kind of facility idea going on for some of the gaming stores
yeah,
nearby. Tell us about that, how that's set up, and kind of
yeah.
if that's something you're planning on taking to conventions down the road as well, where people can just
Yeah.
come to the convention and be like, I want to check this out.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Because it's a thing that is sold by the fourth sense smell, which you can't really share easily across online purchasing arc,
Right.
and because we didn't, these really are collections of scents that don't exist. We can't say, oh, that's like, it smells like, boysenberry and this and that. It's really combinations of scents that just didn't exist prior. So in these live events, we get a chance to let people see and experience them and film them, getting the reactions and their awakening moments when they're like, oh wow. So Mysticon is our next one. Is here in Carlsbad. It's put on by two really great local gamers, who the heroes of Evermore and for the Forever DM, Chris and Morgan, are just exactly what would be a dream customer for all of us who build things for people who love fantasy. They put on this convention last year, amazingly pulling it off, just two guys and a lot of heart. And now they are doubling up the size of it. So we're a supporter of that. We had a couple of our all-in packages we gave away as grand prizes to their raffle last year, and we'll be there again this year on October 24th. And in Carlsbad, you can look up Mysticon to see there's selling tickets, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And at that location, as you and I were prepping for the podcast, we were talking about how do we expand. And one of the challenges as a small startup is, if you want to be in people's retail stores, there is a large upfront commitment to inventory. You have to build a good looking display. You have to
Right.
have inventory on hand. You have to have enough of all your inventory so that you don't sell out in 2 days on the one and have a bunch that people don't want. So what we've decided we're going to do is have displays basically that allow a couple of the scents to be experienced live at the display, to see the scent engine and the wand, but then have it be a portal to our digital store that has a direct plug-in to the retail store so that they can still make their margin, but they don't have to pay a big upfront
Yeah, or carry all the
amount for
stuff.
inventory
Yeah.
or carry all the stuff, and we can do it as a direct fulfillment. And what we found is a number of our backers and people have personal relationships with their game store owners because they're
Right.
almost all individually owned. So they can help champion the cause the way that we have in all of the local Southern California stores been in and talked to the owners, and even all the Kickstarter was done at Ease Games, which is the largest gaming store down here. And Ron, the owner, helped actually build the table sets, and it was
Nice.
just so cool. And if you go to their store right now in the Dragon Room, their largest rentable play area, the Scented Realms collection, the all-in collections on the wall, and you can do for your 3-hour game session, have Scented Realms. So those kind of bringing it to market, letting there be locations around the map where people can go and check it out in person if they're
Yeah.
close enough. That's our goal. It's again always, what do you spend your money on when you're a small startup, trying to be as smart as we can with that. So these displays are a way that we hope we can kind of create a neat interactive way with our community to bring our product forward and expand the 4 cents.
Well, hopefully you can get out to some of the other conventions here next year too, down the
Yes,
road and the year after,
that's
things like Gen Con and Gary Con and
oh
all the tabletop role playing big conventions. Because you guys get
yes.
a booth there, you're that's a huge
Oh,
spread too. So it'll
from
be
your
awesome.
lips to God's ears, man. That's what we want to do. We want we want to do that. The cost again of attending
Right.
and being at that is something we balance against the delivering of our products, of
Right.
course, and then trying to advertise into our next Kickstarter. Kickstarter gives a really unique platform to do one or two building blocks before you take that big
Yeah.
retail leap. And so we're hopeful that we can double up our next campaign. We did $130,000 on our first campaign, and about $12,000 to $15,000 worth of after sales to people that wanted to expand their orders and whatnot. So we were really, really successfully blessed by that. So if we can double that and double the community that comes with it, and then by the time we go to the Scent Adventure books, we hope we can have a body of people that have experienced our product. They've reviewed it online. They know that we're not just the ones talking about it. And in doing that, that will break down that barrier of selling something that smells like something you've never smelled before.
Yeah.
Somebody asked us, what does a Yeti smell like? And we're like, it smells just like a Bigfoot, but in a winter biome.
That makes sense. It makes sense. That's exactly.
So we're like, exactly what are the Bigfoots? And I'm like, all right, well, let's get into that. So trying to break all of those down and have a moment where people just go, you got to smell it. You either
Yeah.
have or you haven't, and we have videos of not young girls in particular, but just young people, children who for the first time smell some of these, and their precious expressions are just, oh my gosh. And it's just something that we really are excited for the children's book to have some of these, again, nighttime procedure advocacy moments for your kids to pick their favorites. And then some of the back end of those story scents are more like lavenders and calming things for aromatherapy
Yeah.
to drop their mind into a more meditative state. But the front end of it can be a lot of these fun adventures and scents for it.
Yeah.
So every which way we can bring fantasy scents to life, we want to do that. So people will say, I remember when people didn't know what a goblin smelled like, and I remember when people did. And that's kind of this moment in
That's
time.
great.
Why not?
Well, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe in the Q&A after here, I've got one of your things right here. Maybe I'll do it for the live stream Q&A at the end, and people can see the live reaction.
Yes.
Scott, thank you so much for joining
Control,
us.
which is the 10. You bet, man.
People can find you at scentedrealms.com. Of course, you're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all Scented Realms. One theme across the board. I know you mentioned you're on some other social medias. Eventually, you're just going to be everywhere, right? That's the plan.
Trying our best. Yes, trying our best to be as many places as we can where fans of fantasy exist.
So there you go. Go check that out on all the social medias. Scented Realms, everybody. Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick.
Stick around for the Q&A at the end. People in the
You
live
bet.
stream chat can throw your questions into the chat, and we will get to them here in just a bit. But for everyone else, coming up on Epic Realms, we're going to be getting award-winning author, game designer, and writer Brandon Crilly is going to be joining us. He has worked on RPGs such as Fantasy Age, The Expanse, Call of Cthulhu, Shadowrun, and more. His book, Catalyst, will soon be getting a second book. He's going to join us to talk about that, talk about tabletop RPGs, and everything in between. So join us for that episode coming up just down the road. So make sure to follow, like, subscribe. It helps us and helps our guests. So for Scott Curry, I want to thank you all for listening to Epic Realms.